The fastest way to stay broke is not earning too little. It is buying things that quietly train your brain to love feeling rich more than becoming rich. And that is why some people can make good money for 10 years and still feel financially fragile, while someone else with a similar income slowly builds real wealth almost in the background. It is rarely one giant purchase that ruins them. It is the normal stuff, the socially approved stuff, the things nobody warns you about because they do not look dangerous. They look deserved. They look harmless. They look like rewards. But underneath them is a money pattern that keeps people performing wealth instead of building it. If you have ever looked at your income and thought, I should be further ahead by now, there's a good chance this is where the answer lives. Not in some missing investment trick. Not in one magical side hustle. It lives in the spending habits that shape your identity, your impulses, and your sense of what is normal. Because wealth is not only built by what you buy, it is built by what you stop needing in order to feel okay. And the hardest part is that many of the things you need to stop buying are not obviously bad. They are emotional purchases disguised as adult life. They are comfort purchases disguised as efficiency. They are status purchases disguised as self-expression. And until you see them clearly, you will keep feeding a life that looks fine on the outside while your financial future stays weak underneath. That is what this video is really about. Not deprivation, not becoming cheap, not pretending you should never enjoy your money. This is about money psychology. It is about 8 categories of things that quietly drain wealth because they keep people trapped in a cycle of earning, rewarding, upgrading, and repeating. And the deeper you go into this, the more you're going to notice something uncomfortable. A lot of spending is not really about the item. It is about the feeling the item gives you for a moment. Relief, identity, validation, convenience, escape. The problem is that those feelings fade fast, but the financial consequences often stay. The first thing you need to stop buying, or at least stop buying in the way most people do, is status transportation. Not transportation, status transportation. There is a huge difference. A reliable car can support your life. A status car often starts managing your identity instead, and that is where it gets expensive. The reason cars are such a powerful wealth killer is not only that they depreciate. The real reason is that cars are emotionally loaded. They let you signal competence, adulthood, taste success, momentum, and control all at once. That makes them extremely hard to evaluate rationally. People do not say, I want a car that keeps me mobile at the lowest reasonable lifetime cost. They say, I want something nicer now that I'm doing better. Or, I work hard, so I deserve to drive something I enjoy. Or, I do not want people to think I'm struggling. And suddenly a transportation tool becomes a psychological device. The money damage is not only the payment. It is the insurance, the maintenance, the tax, the registration, the interest, the emotional pressure to keep upgrading, and the invisible cost of normalizing a life where your identity gets attached to a rapidly losing asset. What makes this worse is that the car often feels affordable because the conversation is framed around the monthly payment. That is one of the most dangerous phrases in personal finance. Monthly payment. It makes almost anything feel manageable for a moment. But the wealthier mindset asks a different question. Not can I make the payment fit, but what is this payment preventing? What will this money not be able to become because I wanted this machine to say something about me right now? The second thing you need to stop buying is lifestyle relief disguised as convenience. This category is much bigger than most people realize. It includes constant food delivery, excessive ride shares, daily coffee purchases that are really about emotional routine, paying extra to avoid tiny discomforts all day long, and building a life where your first answer to friction is always to spend. That is what convenience becomes at its worst. Not a tool, but a reflex. And the psychological trap here is subtle because convenience usually feels earned. You're busy. You are tired. You have responsibilities. So paying for ease feels rational. But when that response becomes automatic, you stop noticing how much of your income is going toward avoiding low-level discomfort. This matters because wealth is built partly through tolerance. Tolerance for minor friction. Tolerance for planning. Tolerance for doing some things yourself. tolerance for not always choosing the easiest option in the moment. The person who can absorb small inconvenience without turning it into spending is often far more financially powerful than the person who earns more but needs constant purchase relief. Now, let's make this personal for a second, because this is where the real problem begins. The main issue is not that people buy one overpriced thing now and then. The main issue is that they build an emotional economy around spending. A bad day creates a purchase. A long week creates a purchase. Feeling behind creates a purchase. Feeling bored creates a purchase. Feeling deprived creates a purchase. Feeling successful creates a purchase. And once spending becomes the default response to emotion, building wealth gets much harder than people expect, even if they're earning more than enough on paper. So before we go deeper, write this in the comments. The one money habit or type of spending you most want to change. Maybe it is, I need to stop buying convenience every day. Maybe it is, I need to stop upgrading my lifestyle every time I make more. Maybe it is, I want to stop emotional shopping. Maybe it is, I need to stop financing my identity. Write it down clearly. That matters because once you put a pattern into words, it becomes harder to hide from. A vague frustration stays vague. A named habit becomes something you can actually watch, challenge, and improve. The third thing you need to stop buying is trend-driven tech upgrades. This one hits people harder than they think because tech spending does not always feel luxurious. It feels current, necessary, productive, modern, reasonable. But there is a huge psychological difference between using technology and using technology as a way to keep renewing your sense of relevance. The newest phone, the upgraded earbuds, the slightly better laptop you probably do not need yet. The latest device you convince yourself will make you more organized, more efficient, more serious. Sometimes it does. A lot of the time it does not. It just gives you a brief hit of freshness and then becomes normal, at which point the cycle resets. This is one of the ways middle-class and professional earners leak money without feeling irresponsible. They're not buying nonsense. They're buying good products, useful products. But usefulness is not the same as necessity. And necessity is not the same as urgency. Wealthier thinkers ask, is this replacing a real bottleneck in my life? Or am I buying stimulation under the label of optimization? The fourth thing you need to stop buying is expensive identity clothing. Not clothes. Identity clothing. Everyone needs clothes. Some people genuinely love fashion, and that can be a real interest. But a lot of spending in this category is not really about style. It is about social armor. Looking like the kind of person who has it together. Looking wealthier than you feel. Looking current enough to avoid insecurity. Dressing for an imagined version of yourself that your finances keep trying to catch up with. When this happens, your wardrobe stops being functional and becomes a rotating strategy for self-soothing. This is why clothing can become such a quiet wealth killer. Not because one item ruins you, but because it sits in a part of life where identity, insecurity, aspiration, and comparison mix together. You see someone else who looks polished. You imagine the right pieces will make you feel more put together. You buy for the future version of yourself. But if that spending is not anchored to reality, it becomes another form of emotional investing with terrible returns. The fifth thing you need to stop buying is oversized housing ambition. This one deserves more attention because housing is where many people lock in a version of life that makes wealth building much harder. And the trap is that housing overspending rarely feels reckless. It feels adult, stable, aspirational, more room, a better area, a nicer place, a slightly bigger payment that seems worth it because this is where you live. But housing has a special power over financial outcomes because it is a massive fixed cost that reshapes everything else. A slightly too large housing decision can quietly eat the margin that would have funded investing, cash reserves, debt payoff, flexibility, and peace of mind. What makes this category so psychologically difficult is that housing is emotional. It is tied to identity, safety, family, social comparison, and the fantasy of finally arriving. So people stretch for it more easily than they should. Then once they're inside the payment, they normalize the pressure. They tell themselves this is what adulthood costs. But if your housing choice leaves you constantly tight, you did not buy stability. You bought image-backed stress. Quietly wealthy people tend to be more conservative with housing than culture expects because they understand a powerful truth. The best home financially is often not the most impressive one you can technically carry. It is the one that still leaves room for your future. The sixth thing you need to stop buying is fake frugality. This one surprises people because it sounds like the opposite of overspending. But fake frugality is incredibly expensive. It is when you buy the cheapest version of something that repeatedly fails. It is when you delay maintenance until the cost gets worse. It is when you buy random low-cost clutter because each individual purchase looks harmless. People often think wealth is built by always choosing the lowest price. It is not. It is built by choosing wisely enough that money is not repeatedly wasted. Fake frugality often comes from a scarcity mindset that focuses too narrowly on the immediate cost while ignoring the total cost. A good mattress you keep for years can be more intelligent than replacing bad ones. A reliable used car can be more rational than buying a constantly failing cheap one. A pair of shoes that last can be cheaper than 3 fashionable pairs that do not. Quietly wealthy people do not worship low prices. They respect durability, utility, and total ownership cost. The seventh thing you need to stop buying is approval spending. This may be one of the deepest categories in the whole video because it sits underneath many of the others. Approval spending is money used to maintain belonging, admiration, or non-judgment. It is paying for dinners you cannot comfortably afford because you do not want to be the difficult one. It is joining trips you should probably skip because you do not want to feel left behind. It is gifting beyond your means because you do not want to look cheap. It is paying for a lifestyle that signals, I'm doing fine, even when you are quietly stressed. And that is what makes it dangerous. Humans are wired for belonging. We do not want to be the one who says no too often. We do not want to break the social rhythm. So we spend to stay synchronized with a group, a friend circle, a workplace, a family culture, a level of perceived success. But wealth is often built by becoming slightly less available for social performance. Not rude, not isolated, just less willing to let other people's expectations dictate your recurring obligations. And since we're in the middle of this, let me say something important. If this kind of conversation helps you understand money more clearly, subscribe to the channel. Not because it is some routine line, but because practical finance only spreads when people who care about real improvement stay connected to it. A lot of money advice either sounds too extreme or too generic, but the truth is usually in the patterns we normalize. The more people understand those patterns, the more likely they are to build real financial strength instead of just staying busy with money problems. The eighth thing you need to stop buying is constant self-reward. This is one of the most socially protected habits in modern personal finance. You work hard. You are stressed. Life is expensive. You have had a rough week. You deserve something. That sentence right there has probably cost more people real wealth than they realize. Not because you should never enjoy your money, but because many people have trained themselves to tie reward to spending so tightly that progress becomes impossible to sustain. They pay off debt and reward themselves with new consumption. They get a raise and reward themselves with new subscriptions, travel, clothes, upgrades, and dining habits. They stay disciplined for a few weeks and then compensate for the discipline with spending. The deeper problem here is that many people do not know how to feel successful without purchasing something. They do not know how to feel relief without buying ease. They do not know how to celebrate without increasing lifestyle. This is profoundly important in money psychology because wealth usually requires a person to develop new forms of emotional satisfaction. Satisfaction from seeing savings grow. Satisfaction from having margin. Satisfaction from not needing every desire immediately answered. Satisfaction from stability, not just stimulation. Let's go deeper because this is where the hidden reason behind a lot of bad buying habits shows up. People often buy things not because they love the item, but because the item temporarily closes a gap between how they feel and how they want to feel. The gap might be insecurity, exhaustion, comparison, boredom, lack of control, fear of being behind, feeling unseen, feeling deprived. That is why a purchase can feel so emotionally effective for a short time. It briefly repairs the feeling. But because it did not solve the root problem, the cycle starts again. And this is why just telling yourself spend less usually fails. Because most overspending is not a math problem first. It is a psychological response pattern. The person is not only buying a thing, they are buying a state change. They want to feel different now, more accomplished, more relaxed, more stylish, more in control, more alive, more rewarded. If you do not understand that, you will keep trying to solve emotional spending with pure willpower, and pure willpower is unreliable when life gets stressful. The stronger move is to become curious about your pattern. What do you buy when you feel overworked? What do you buy when you feel insecure? What do you buy when you feel like everyone else is doing better? What do you buy when you want to feel like you're moving up in life? What do you buy when you want relief? Those questions are not abstract. They are the map. The person who learns their emotional spending triggers is often halfway to changing them. There's another myth worth killing here. A lot of people think wealthy behavior means acting minimal or strict all the time. It does not. Wealth-building behavior is often about selectivity, not permanent denial. It is choosing a few things you value deeply and refusing to be sloppy about the rest. It is enjoying quality where it genuinely matters to you while refusing to let your entire life become an expensive performance. That is why a person can be deeply intentional with money and still enjoy nice things. The difference is that the nice things are chosen, not emotionally automatic. And now we get to the deeper revelation behind all 8 categories. The truth is that building wealth is often less about buying assets and more about reducing the categories of things that constantly compete with your assets. People know they should invest. The real question is, what is repeatedly defeating that intention? What keeps beating your future every month? For many people, it is not a lack of knowledge. It is the endless parade of purchases that feel too small, too normal, too earned, too social, or too practical to challenge. But every one of those categories is pulling from the same pool of money your future needs. This is the climax most people miss. Wealth is not only a product of financial intelligence. It is a product of emotional independence. Independence from the need to impress. Independence from a need to reward yourself with spending every time life gets heavy. Independence from constant convenience. Independence from approval purchases. Independence from using nicer things to patch over stress, boredom, or insecurity. Once a person builds more of that independence, their finances often improve much faster than expected because the leaks were never random. They were psychological. That is why 2 people can know the same investing basics, earn similar salaries, and still end up in radically different places. One understands the emotional layer and learns to manage it. The other keeps treating spending as a harmless expression of personality, taste, reward, and normal life. One becomes wealthier because money gets to stay and work. The other stays in motion but not in progress because every phase of life keeps asking their income to perform for the present. So if you really want to build wealth, the question is not just what stocks to buy or how much to save. The question is what kinds of purchases keep hijacking your ability to keep what you earn. What have you normalized that your future cannot afford? What feels necessary that is actually just familiar? What spending would disappear if you no longer needed it to regulate your mood or image? That is where the breakthroughs happen. Quietly, privately, powerfully. At this point, someone might be thinking, okay, but do I have to stop buying all of these things completely? No, that is usually not the smartest approach. The smarter move is to stop buying them unconsciously. Stop buying them as reflex. Stop buying them to fix emotions they cannot fix. Stop buying them at a level your future keeps paying for. This is not about turning into a robot. It is about becoming deliberate enough that your money stops leaking into patterns that do not truly serve you. And that is what makes this hopeful. Because once you see the pattern, your progress can change surprisingly fast. Not because your income suddenly doubles, but because money stops disappearing into hidden psychological categories. You stop financing identities that are not real. You stop outsourcing every tiny discomfort. You stop paying for belonging. You stop buying upgrades that were really just self-soothing with better packaging. And as those patterns weaken, your saving, investing, and financial peace starts strengthening almost automatically. So if your income is decent, but your progress still feels weirdly slow, this may be the answer you've been missing. Not that you need to work harder. Not that you need another hustle. You may simply need to stop buying the things that keep interrupting your ability to become wealthier. The things that feel normal in the moment, but expensive in the long arc of life. And that brings us to the conclusion most people need to hear. Building wealth does not usually require living a joyless life. It requires becoming more honest about what your spending is really for. If it is for utility, fine. If it is for joy and you can truly afford it, fine. If it is for genuine value, fine. But if it is for image, numbness, approval, convenience addiction, emotional compensation, or the need to feel ahead for 5 minutes, then the cost is usually much larger than the price tag. Because the real price is not just the money, it is the delay it creates in your future. If this helped you see your own money habits more clearly, subscribe, keep learning about money and financial growth with this channel, and share this video with someone who earns enough to build wealth, but keeps wondering where all the money goes. And there's a natural next step from here, because once you understand what you need to stop buying, the next conversation is what to buy instead if you actually want freedom, stability, and long-term growth. That is where money psychology turns into real wealth-building behavior.